Liz Connors, welcome to the show.
Hello, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to reconnect with you after it's been a couple decades. And I actually can't remember really, we were on the track team together at McAllister. But I can't recall, were you in distance events or were you a jumper? What was your specialty?
Yeah, I was in distance like all the way. Um, Ever since I was a kid, my parents would just let me run, and I always wanted to run. And later in the show, maybe I'll tell you about that and the psychological piece of that and what I would learn about that. But yeah, I remember, I think you were a freshman when I was a senior.
Okay, yeah, so I was busy just like getting my feet wet.
Yeah, what are we even doing here?
It's so funny, like the microcosm of a 4 year progression. It's like you're a beginner, and then pretty soon, as a sophomore, you feel like you know everything, and then and it's so interesting because right then you're gonna have to leave, and then there's this like bonus year where you're still some of your friends are still there, and you're like hanging out. Um, but it's not this like indefinite thing when you're an adult where it's imagine if every job you started they were like you can only work here for 4 years, or everything you did there
You
was like
know,
a
some people
clear.
say you should work every day like that, like as if you were quitting the next day because you have nothing to lose.
Gotcha. So just telling people so long, sucker, and I'm out.
Well, I guess it depends on if you take the Dave Chappelle route. I'm not sure if you've seen that sketch, but he just like clears the desk. He's like, "That's it. I'm out." He like runs around all crazy. But I don't know. Some people it like just removes their inhibitions as they'll say the things that they always wanted to say. And I guess that could be productive or not, but either way, it's the truth. And I personally, in my life now, that's what I try and be every day, is as alive and as true as I can be. And I think that sometimes when we have these jobs, instead of just going in and being us, we go in and we try and fit in while we're figuring it out. And I honestly think you set a precedent almost accidentally of like, I'm that person when really, so it's super interesting because I love that you brought that up because it actually kind of feeds into everyday living and the dynamics of people trying to fit in instead of trying to just be.
So maybe you could give an example of what it's like to be true versus, putting on some type of mask, like where that might show up for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it shows up a lot in relationships and even the whole concept of relationships. You can go back to this idea that you're trying to keep people. Or really the idea that you're trying to keep anything in your life. You've heard that phrase, if you love someone, let them go. Well, it doesn't actually mean that you have to be like, bye. It means that you love them enough and you love yourself enough to be fully true and to allow them to be fully true and to trust that that love will endure. And if it doesn't, to know that it's not meant. So it's just like that full state of trust, um, that allows you to be 100% pass through expression. So if you're not trying to keep someone, but you are loving them, you're not holding on. It's just a really different energy. You're not changing how you're acting or being or what your expressions or preferences are per se to keep them around. So it's just more true, it's more honest. Now, that doesn't mean that you're just an a hole and you're not aware of how your actions affect them, but it means that you take you stop letting that stop you from being true. You stop letting a fear of loss prevent you from acknowledging or radically accepting your honest, deepest truth, if that makes sense.
And what would that look like, in terms of like, would you be saying different things, or
Yeah, usually it's so surprising. Now, I didn't just get here overnight. It was like a step in this direction of like really acknowledging where I had resistance and where I was holding my tongue. And for women, this is really, really common because we've been taught, and people really in general have been taught not to express that, too many expressions in any one direction is uncomfortable, and unsightly, almost even, uh and radical expression is really truth. And if consciousness too is just being, it's being with what is, being full pass through. And so when I started to look into that and look into healing myself, because I used to experience some chronic illness, quote unquote, we like to say chronic illnesses. And so I went to inward to see where resistance was, and see what that was saying to me. And I had a lot of, there's been a lot of pass through in my family of thyroid issues. And thyroid, the root cause of thyroid issues, and we can get more into this later if time permits, is lack of true expression. It's literal suppression. And it does connect to the heart space too, and some unworthiness, wounding. Um, and so I started to ask myself, well, what does true expression look like? And where to feel into where I was stopping myself from saying what I really wanted to say because of fear. And really looking at any places of resistance in my life where I was preventing my own authenticity or my own flow, especially around fear. Because living in fear is really counterintuitive to being full love or full truth or full expression and growth. um, so I started to notice what I'm noticing, I like to say. And so starting to observe myself or witness these behaviors or times where I would feel myself actually tighten up, and I would feel myself editing myself. And so I just tried to do the opposite, and at first it was a little clunky. I had to do a lot of repattering. I would start saying something and then actually pause myself and say, oh, no, let me try again, and I allowed myself to be a work in progress while I kind of started to practice this. And also words, learning about words and how am I using my spells, that's why they call it spelling. Um, and when we speak, you know, we're casting this frequency out into the field, and it actually creates ripples. We also hear it and program it into our body, which is a large percentage of water. We program it into our cells, and it loops in our minds. So I also made a conscious decision that I want to make sure I'm saying what I want to say. And there's so much tied into this, and I've learned it all through so much that I do want to make one note too about truth and why it's so important to me is that I work a lot in timelines and dimensional and frequency, what that feels like, what the difference is when the switch is happening, and observing that in both myself and humanity. And what I've noticed is when you aren't being fully truthful or authentic, you fractalize your timeline. You basically split off some of your life force energy into a different parallel timeline, and it's more difficult to stay in your full power or life force. You get a little diluted every time you lie or step out of your full truth. And you think about that, and you think about how often we stretch the truth in our reality to buffer someone else's feelings, and you realize maybe why things are so chaotic and why people are so confused or can be so sad or frustrated or tired or sick. So that is a big answer. I'm going to pause.
Okay, wow. I had never thought about that's fractalizing you into different timelines. And then I'm assuming, because this is something that the shaman that I work with talks about, like you want to optimize your personal power. And if you're sort of leaking power into different timelines, do you eventually have to reintegrate those timelines like to become whole? And that costs energy, or what's happening with those alternate timelines that get.
Well, wonderful question. I love how your mind works. Yes. So what happens is, there's actually a scene at the end of The Matrix, and he gets to, like, I don't know what they call him, the chairman or whatever, and there's all these screens behind him, and he says, "You've been here before." And basically on all the screens, it's all the different times he's been there, the different ways he's taken to get there. Basically think of that as all the timeline versions of him. And he finally has pulled all his power to this in this one moment and chose differently, chose himself, chose to honor his full multidimensional, soul's essence and capacity. And that is when you bring your full power, your full truth. You are being. You aren't trying. You aren't shoulding, woulding, coulding. You're being just your full essence. And when you do things, we go in these loops, so people talk about ascension as this kind of coil like this. But
Mhm.
what I've understood, and people can say that this isn't true, but I have literally witnessed it in my experience and lived it. So this is what I have to say. We are in a series of figure eights, and they're loops. There's an X at the middle, and these figure eights are all connecting. So there's a bunch of them, and they're also spinning in time. And when we can either choose, when we get to the X, we can choose to go on that ride again, or we could step out and say, I'm done with this, and choose something different. And then we go on one that's this way. And, slowly you keep stepping out and up. So it is this upward spiral in terms of ascension and to dimensions. But there are loops, and you don't have to go on if you can just be full pass through. This is my truth. But the challenge of that in our society is that we're constantly being tested. um, and it's practice. This is a place where we come to practice learning who we are and to practice learning what consciousness is. And it's ever growing and ever expanding. So the idea that you could just do it perfect on the first try is not really fair anyway. So, people get a little like nervous about it, but I'm like, we're just practicing. Just allow yourself to practice. The fear is counterintuitive to the game, right? Or judging the fear, because it's really the judgment that brings the frequency down and brings the fear. So just allow. And so, anyway, so what happens is when you get to that X point, and you choose yourself, you choose your full, authentic, pass through truth, whatever it is, in that exact moment, you make a 0 point and you collapse all your timelines and you get deja vu. And depending on how many timelines you fractalized into is how long the deja vu lasts. So the
Oh,
deja vu, I've experienced, one time I had deja vu for 12 hours.
whoa.
And I knew everything that was going to happen for 12 hours. I knew everyone that was going to call, exactly what we were going to talk about, what the jokes were going to be. I mean, it was insanity. And I'm witnessing it, but because I'm the one with the consciousness, I'm consciously experiencing this. I know it, but the other person doesn't know it. So they think this is the first time we've had this conversation. It's so crazy. And I have this wisdom about them, about what we've talked about, but they don't have any conscious remembrance of this. So it's a trip. Sometimes it's just like a split, a hair, a blip. If you're really living in your truth, deja vu can only be like, 1 second, and you're like, but I've been here before. And so, it's super interesting. And then what happens is after you have the 0 point, you rapidly flit through each of those timelines, or maybe there's different dimensional densities of the earth. And so depending on where you were in those timelines, you rapidly flit through and you have to consciously collect your energy. So you witness versions of you, and depending on how different the densities were, this can be very uncomfortable and very confusing, because you can feel like you've gone way backwards. I mean, we're talking, there have been times where I feel like I went a year back, and I'm like, why am I here? Why am I feeling like this? And you consciously, on those days, sometimes I'll just get like the download. And when I say download, I mean literally I either hear it or feel it or just know it, from either source or from my higher self. I believe we're all kind of one. Um, and it tells me to stay in, to, sometimes I'll even feel apathy. And the point of that is so that you don't engage in a lower version of you and stay there and like go back into the loop. And so you have to really be diligent and conscious and feel where you're at. Um, and so it's a really interesting time because you also witness old triggers that were tests for you, or, that were transcendence for you, I like to say, rather, um, where you didn't choose yourself before. And so what I find is in those days, I usually will stay in and I will meditate or just be quiet or sleep, because you're supposed to observe and not absorb, when you're just supposed to be collecting your energy and like literally holding your vibe. um, and then when that happens and you've collected all your power back, you can feel where you actually are. For like, sometimes it happens for the first time in weeks, depending on how fractalized you were and how long it took you to learn the lesson. Sometimes it could be days, sometimes it could be like a year where you just didn't feel right, you felt off, and then suddenly you're like, ah. So it's pretty magical when you don't fractalize yourself.
And at this point, you're living truthfully, and so you're able to maintain, because you were talking about you're pretty sensitive to when timelines are switching or moving. Does that give you just a clear perspective of like what's happening on your timeline? Are we talking like the timeline for Earth Collective, or what do you mean about that?
Yeah, well, it's a little complex because we kind of have our own timeline experiences, I'll say. And then simultaneously, there are some collective timelines. And how that works is it's where most of the life force for the living beings, um, where most of the life force is being spent. So it's all about frequency too, because energy is frequency, and everything we say, do, feel is a frequency. Everything in our body is a frequency and makes a frequency. So it's the timelines feel different. The dimensions feel different. And there's patterns too that you can discern when you're about to level up in a dimensional frequency. And I can talk about that in a second. But for me, I've noticed there's tells. So, like when you play poker with someone, there's tells for the different when a timeline's switching. For me, I always hear a siren.
Uh,
So there'll be like an
I live in
ambulance.
the city, so that's
Yeah,
happening like all the
yeah.
time.
So, you have to kind of learn what your own attunement is to that and feeling that and sensing that. I can also note differences in so here's an example. So last summer I worked at this resort, and I think I was telling you this story before. I don't
Mhm.
really try and work anymore. It's I'm trying to anchor a different code in. I believe we are all infinite, and abundance is our birthright. So I'm really doing a different thing and flowing with that, and we can talk more about that in a little bit. But this I got a download that said I needed to leave my house. It was 8 p.m. I was in my pajamas. I don't drink. It said I needed to go to a bar. I'm like, "Really? Universe? Okay." Um and I get these what I call like missions, which sounds a little crazy and people love to gaslight this, but in my experience I know it to be true, and I always know why I'm there when I get there because it hits me over the head. So I get to this bar. It's super divey, like small town, couple hundred people. I mean, this is a town of like 500. It's townies, not judging. It's just not usually, where I go. Um, and I walk up to the bar and I'm like, all right, we're here. I'm doing a thing. So I just, I order a soda water and some french fries. And like all of a sudden, and I'm this being comes behind me and I can feel it. It's a male. He's about, 40 years old or something. And I'm just like, okay, so there's a channel. Someone wants to be channeled. Okay. And then, the woman next to me turns her head and I say, hey, how's it going? And this happens to me because when you carry the truth frequency, um, you become a safe space for people, and you actually just this just runs through your field, the truth frequency. And so she looks at me and I can see her mask fall, and she just starts crying, and she's telling me about how her husband passed away. And I mean, this woman just starts telling me her whole life, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. I'm so sorry, but he's here. And I'm like, tell her the story about I was sitting at home and sources like sends me here. So I'm like, so I'm here for you, and him, and what do you want to talk about? And so I proceed to channel and say all these, the most random things come through. you know uh they had a weird thing about insects, and so like uh possums and like insects really coming through, and it's like stuff you can't make up. It's just how you get there as a channel is trust. Again, trust is really key because unconditional love, so the consciousness is unconditional love. Um and that, personally, I think is the highest vibrational frequency, and unconditional love is truth. So one and the same. Um and so that the channel is just, you just trust the random stuff that comes and trust that they'll know what it is. You
Mhm.
have to trust yourself enough to just blurt it out. And so we had this crazy long conversation, and then at the end of it, okay, I forgot one part of the story. The day prior, I had got another download that I needed to go to this resort. Okay, so back to the beginning.
Mhm.
Go to this resort. I love to get french fries. It's like one of my vices. It's fine. It is what it is. Otherwise, I pretty much eat the cleanest diet of anyone I know. But french fries, we're alive. And so I go in and this place is like ocean on three sides, but it's not the vibe. And that woman that I would be sitting at the bar with is working there. I forgot about this.
Hmm.
And again, she looks at me, her whole mask falls off, and she goes, I wouldn't eat here if I were you. She's like, we are such a disaster right now. We just got bought, telling me things that probably
Oh,
she
you
should.
had met her the day before?
Yeah, and I forgot about that until
Oh,
just now. I'm
wow.
like, oh, right. So there was that instant like recognition. And I'm like, oh my
Uh-huh.
God, sources bumped me into this person twice now. And her mask has fallen both times. And she's just been pure truth. And so that was how we started a conversation at the bar. She said, I don't know why I said those things to you. She's like, she's like, you need to work at the resort. And because Source had taken me there and then taken me to her, I was like, okay, fine. And by the time we were finished talking, she'd already like told me, okay, go it, show up at Monday at this time. And I was not actively looking for a job. And so anyway, I get this job at this resort, and it's just like being in a sitcom. It is such a great practice training ground for watching different timelines play out, different loops play out around you, um, and to just test your being, test your frequency. And it was just comedy gold. In fact, I should write a sitcom about this place. So there were things that would happen in lower timelines that would completely be gone either within hours or like the next day. Like in one timeline, there were ants at the resort. There were just ants everywhere, and there was a terrible smell behind the bar. And I this could come and go as timelines would shift. And in one timeline, this woman was a terrible person. She just was mean and constantly getting in trouble. And, I, you know, I shouldn't say terrible person, but just not pleasant to be around, just a bully to the rest of the staff. And in one timeline, she was the sweetest, like harmonized, truthful, like still herself, but just like a polished version of her.
Hmm.
Um, and no ants, no smell in that timeline. The kitchen was dialed in. In one timeline, the kitchen was like squeaking by, like barely running. So, I mean, vast differences, not even just a little, like major differences. And I could witness them changing. And the other crazy thing is like when you carry these truth codes, you can trigger people so big. And it's not by anything you're just bumbling along, being jolly and truthful and just loving everyone. And they just think that you are, it just feels discordant or uncomfortable to them because you're going to shine light on anything that they haven't brought into harmony. And I don't say that with ego, I just say that with knowledge and experience and love and compassion and empathy, because when people respond like that, you really have to stay in it, stay in the care, the compassion. And it's not that you have to take abuse, but you witness it. You witness what is happening and you just allow it to be a good show. Um, and you just hold as much love and compassion as you can in the field. So, for example, one day I came in and they were ganging up on me because they I was getting all the tips. And it's so funny. They tried moving me to the worst areas. They tried giving me the worst shifts, and I'd always get the most tips, the most compliments from customers. And I kept saying to them, it's not about competition. I'm not here for the money. And that's why I'm getting all the money. It's about frequency. It's about intention.
That's what you told them? And
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, yeah, we got it.
They didn't care for that in their lower versions of them, but in their higher versions for them, they loved me. And it was there's so many other pieces to this. I didn't have to apply for this job. I didn't have to show I had any experience. I literally walked in and the guy's like, "Great, can you start in a couple days?" And my hiring manager is a literal giant. And so I'm just when you hold a certain code, your experience becomes very magical. And, or at least if you have the beliefs, because it's all about what beliefs you have. Um, and at the end of this journey, I could see most of the staff that I was there to work with had stabilized the higher timeline. So those old timelines purged out, there were several collapses. And when I left, some of these people physically expressed their gratitude for me for coming into their life. And just, they said, "We don't know what it is, but we just feel like we need to thank you for being here." And it's just, I mean, that's so weird, right? It took me like to even say that out loud, still a little is like, oh, that's so weird. But it's just how God works through the experience. And when you can be with the flow, um, there's signs. There's signs.
That brings up an experience that I had recently, and I'm wondering how that fits in here. I was having a morning where I was sort of not feeling that great. There's like a lot of important things I had to do, and I wasn't looking forward to it, and it just kind of had that churning stomach in my feeling. I was like, ugh. But I was going to this conference, this UFO and healing conference, and when I got there, everyone was like, "Oh, your energy is so amazing today," and I was like, "That's weird because I don't feel at ease or really myself." And it was crazy because n- normally people don't say that. They're not like, "I love your energy," or like, "You're glowing," or like, "Look at this guy." And it was just like that over and over again. And I was like, "This is weird because it doesn't match how I'm feeling inside." What's your explanation for that?
Yes, absolutely. That's actually when you've just leveled up. Ooh, I froze. I hope that I'm not frozen on your end. You've usually just leveled up and you're getting used to the stabilization. The old is leaving, the new is coming, and it feels, I like to call it, it feels clunky, or sometimes they say it feels, I feel really sandy today. Something just doesn't feel right. And so those mornings I wake up and I actually kind of feel grumpy and a little like terrible, but wild card. It's like wild card energy at the same time. And I honestly, I love it. I've learned to just love the wild card energy because that is like where you almost don't give a F enough to suppress your real expression. And if you haven't gotten there yet, you should because it feels so good and it's really fun. Um, I I am not like a traditional spiritual peace person. Like I really believe in finding your peace, but I believe that that is through a lot of chaos and allowing, a lot of allowing and playing and trying. Um, until you figure out who you are, full expression. So it's a beautiful place. And the awesome thing about it is that um, once you've anchored, we haven't talked about anchored and bridging, but that's something that we can talk about. So, with timelines and with timeline collapses and all the stuff we're talking about, there are some people that have certain roles, and I speculate that you probably do have some anchoring roles since you do a lot of out of the box things, things that you've gotten to kind of before a lot of people around you. So, you're literally anchoring. A lot of what we do in the world is just shifting and moving energy and shifting and moving codes. Um, and when you're anchoring, your energy is going to feel so vibrant and alive to people. And so I get that every day. I love your energy. And like people they'll lean, like when they talk to me, they're like leaning in,
Trying
or
to
like
get some of that
close
juice. Yeah.
talkers. Close talking is like a total thing. Hugs, like people want to hug me, like I love hugs, so I'm down for it, but energetically also you kind of maybe sometimes it's good to discern, or not, or just believe that you're infinite and you can just keep refilling. If you can like stabilize that, that is the highest energy, is that we are all one. These are all just versions of me. And you can have radical acceptance. But when you're stabilizing and learning, it's maybe good to discern. But it's a thing. I get it everywhere I go, almost every day. And it's just that authenticity. And the more you step into that, the more it just feels different to people. And this is where, so the anchors, anchor codes, they open timelines and they start to put energy into those timelines. So they start to fuel timelines that maybe weren't available before. And the more people, we need at least 1% to stabilize that, to create an anchor in the field so that that can start to be an option for the collective, for the masses. So it can be a little lonely. The energy up there can feel a little lonely sometimes because there's not many people to stabilize it. So it can kind of feel, this is what you were feeling. It can kind of feel like the rug's pulled out from you. It's hard to get your grounding a little bit because the air is thin, let's just say. There's not as much weight. You're literally in a less dense place. We could have a whole conversation about density, but so it's then once we get 1%, the dominoes start to fall. More people feel it in the field, and naturally they just will start moving towards it. And then more people that hold those frequencies, those authentic frequencies, those truth frequencies, your field will just attune other people. So those people that are saying, I love your energy, you are literally attuning them to the possibility of that path. And it's,
So does that have to be something specific that I was going to be working on or anchoring in, even if I wasn't aware of it?
well, that is a wonderful question. And I'm actually going to say, I don't know 100%. Here's what I'm going to say. Our higher versions, our higher selves, as you integrate, you start to learn more about what your multidimensional mission is. And it's less about what you're physically doing. Like, to, because again, made up, it's something that was made up to like control what people think of as limited resources. When we change our mindset, when we change our expression, when we change our beliefs, we literally change our reality. And so, if you want miracles in your life, well, you have to start believing that they're possible. And every day, in some way, you have to tell universe that you believe in miracles and start to identify what that looks like for you. Is it UFOs? Is it seeing Bigfoot? Is it, seeing a unicorn? You know, you have to, what consciousness is finding a way to expand what we know to what we believe, without seeing it here first, and a combination of using your senses, using your heart, using your feeling. And everyone has all the clairs. If you're familiar with clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance is the most common, but there's tons of these superpowers, I like to call them, but the clairs, and everyone has the ability to attune to them or connect to them. But some people will just have it from birth. Some people, like for me, it was when I purified my body through diet and meditation, it just allowed the channel to come in. And so I literally just slowly became psychic.
Hmm.
And so it's like it doesn't so much matter what you're doing here in a 3D. It's more about becoming, more about allowing your authenticity to come through by challenging what is you and what isn't you, what makes you feel good, what doesn't. Like I say, noticing what you're noticing, um, and moving away from things that don't make you feel good, and moving towards things that, and eventually you'll start to feel the difference and the frequency difference. You'll start to feel what feels electric. And one thing that happens for me, sometimes when something's predestined, it's like a what I call a destiny point. Someone will say something like an opportunity, invite me to something, and it'll literally look and feel like they're spinning magic or silver. It looks like this, like silver. It looks and feels like this oozy silver to me. Like they'll
Oh
say
wow.
something and it just, I don't know how I'm going to make it work, but I know that I will be there. Like I just know that that is a destiny point for my life.
Is there
And
something like that you have going right now?
you know, sadly, no.
Oh,
I'm at
interesting.
this, I'm at a very weird, what I call the in between. So sometimes you can, uh, sometimes you beat the universal probabilities and you've gotten into a timeline where you don't have 1% yet. And so you are the creator. And if you've played so far out of the box like I have, it's really like, well, how far out of the box am I willing to go? And you know, what I keep getting as my download, which again makes me sound like a total crazy person, is stop trying to fit in. Literally, uh, the thing that feels the most discordant to me now is any time where I try and be in society, follow the rules. Um, However, here's what I want to say. My truth is, I'm a lady. I like nice things. So I'm not one of those crazy spiritual hippies that just wants to go live off the grid. You know, I love the idea. I see how that is good for nature. But it just doesn't work for me. I don't like poison oak. I don't like ticks. Um, so in my, you know, in my future, like my perfect happy ending, like we live in these ancient cities like Lumeria, Atlantis, that are, you know, where we do have a little bit of conscious technology. We do have a lot of nature and it's harmoniously woven together. There's a ton of water, there's a lot of green grass. We let AI do certain things, but consciousness and our love and our knowing and our trust is at the helm. Um, and we are not trying to take from the earth. We are trying to nurture the earth. We are trying to use technology to expand our basic core needs, nourishment, love, beauty, joy. It's not about productivity. It's not about sales. It's not about, you know, power. So that's where the different cities, Lumeria and Atlantis, I don't know how much you know about those, went awry and collapsed is when it became about taking from the earth. It became about power. It became about more than we need. It came about comparison and judgment instead of being, just being and allowing the co-creation with source. So anyway, when I get out here and I'm kind of in no man's land, I'm in what I call the in between. There are a percentage that's leveling up at this same level, but until enough of us, that 1%, it's really fuzzy. You can be in that timeline for a week or two, but it's like there's no foundation.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where I'm at now. And I don't want to say it's up to me because it's really a co-creation. Um, but it's a really beautiful place to manifest. But it's really interesting because you also don't have much of foundation. So it's a interesting time to balance and harmonize the ego and to stay, again, hold the vibe and know that, um, and not go back. Because a lot of people, they get to this point, what I call, it's like DEFCON 1. Your ego is just like, this is so uncomfortable. This is so unsafe. Um, and this is where you go back into loops, is where
Mm-hmm.
instead of going into the unknown frontier, you choose comfort. You choose creature comforts and you fall in to, you know, what already is. And so, yeah, the longest answer in the world, which I'm really good at, um, I'm in an in between. I can see dozens of probable timelines, but I kind of said no to a couple of the generated timelines because that's the other thing is like, I don't know if it's the Matrix or if it's, but there are these probable timelines. But what I think it actually is when other people in that 1% are wobbling on their decisions, because in the string theory, we're all connected. So what you decide to do and the frequency you decide to hold it as you are in my reality can affect to some degree what probabilities and timelines we generate, because everything's created from the now. So, where I choose to spend my life force in each moment, forward and backwards, and how I choose to be, can affect all space time.
Spending life force is such a powerful concept. It's like, oh my gosh, this thing that I'm paying attention to or devoting my day to is like, I'm presumably like life force is some sort of like finite amount, and you could like spend it here or you could spend it there, um, and it has a very valuable. It's more valuable than money kind of thing, and so but most people aren't thinking in that way of like how am I going to choose to spend my life force, or even knowing how to assess where they're spending their life force.
Yeah, truth.
When you were talking about I had made a little note because I was kind of curious about it. You were talking about the people in that resort that you were working with, and I've been working on this, just sort of trying to figure out why this is happening. There's a one of the parents of my kids' friends. We get along like very cordially, and they're quite nice. But I have this sense of like it underneath feels really awkward. Like why doesn't it seem like you're who you are? Or um, and I can never place my finger on what's going on. I can't figure out why it seems like both of us are uncomfortable, even though we're like having a nice casual conversation. And it in those people that you were talking to me, like getting triggered for you just being you, because you were shining light on aspects of them, had me wondering if that what was going on, or if it could be something else.
Oh gosh, it could be so many things. I mean, yeah, I speculate that you're so attuned. See, that's the other thing is as you start to ask yourself questions and you start to really come feel your own alignment, um, you start to notice what's not in alignment around you or just what's not a frequency match. And a lot of times it's literally what frequency are they resonating in, and oftentimes it's in terms of their true expression. So what you're probably picking up on is when people aren't fully like emotionally available, or they're suppressing a truth. So even if it's someone I really know super well and we're so close, but they are suppressing just or tweaking the subtlest, they're just bending the truth a little, I can feel it. And
Mm.
even just that little tiny bend, it's not that I need to know everyone's business, but it puts discordance in the resonance. And I can feel it and it doesn't feel good. So sometimes being around people, I might not immediately pick up on the fact that they're lying, but I'll be like, for whatever reason, I just don't want to be around that person right now, or it feels
Mm.
uncomfortable to be around that person right now. And it's interesting because I do, really try and be a safe space for friends and whole, but if they don't want to be truth and express, if they can't match my frequency, I have to make decisions. And unfortunately, the ascension path and the life force, holding your highest vibrational state, will force you to make some very difficult decisions. Um, it will get more and more uncomfortable if you stay in places that aren't resonant. And one could say you could become an Uber Jedi by staying there the longest and observing it and navigating that. And that's one path you could choose to take. Or there's a path that you could take where you, instead of choosing what you already know and what doesn't feel resonant, you choose something else. Or you could, in this particular scenario, in your scenario, you could start trying to ask them some deeper questions. Now, chances are this is probably going to make them very uncomfortable, but there's also a chance where that your truth shining on them and you come in with this like full love and open space energy, like, I'm just curious, I would love to know more about you, or what I find too is shining a light on people consciously, like really observing their genius. That's one of my gifts, is when I meet someone, I know all the versions of them, I can see all the versions of them right then and there. um, and saying something like, oh, I've noticed you're really a great listener, or I've noticed you're really interested in this. Sometimes just breaking the literal ice allows the mask to drop enough to really get into the heart space. There's also a lot of people that are just, when you start operating in your heart and you come into contact with people that are only still in their mind, that's not going to feel resonant either. You might be tricked at first, because if you're like you and you're so curious and you're really mental, then it might feel good for a little while, and then you'll just find there's no substance. Like after a while, you just can't get under the hood, and you're just
Mm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested in this, the research or the science, but like, is this person a robot? It just feels so discordant. And the more you stay in your own vibrational frequency and you rise, you'll learn that letting things go is part of it. It's just, you'll no longer, you start to hold a high enough, you anchored a certain code in your actual system, you're resonating at, because it's all about speeding up your vibration. And so your vibrational frequency is such a difference to certain things that you just won't be able to tolerate it anymore. So like, I, in my journey, I had to, go off alcohol. Now I love French fries, but my body says pretty much no to seed oils, to fried food. Like, even if I want it, uh, it's like sometimes even walking down really, like, let's say the energy drink aisle. I feel nauseous just
Mm.
walking
Mm-hmm.
down the energy drink aisle at a
Oh
grocery
my
store.
gosh.
Or even a grocery store that's almost all packaged foods, I often can't go in because it physically makes me sick. So my family is tricky because they are not necessarily vibrating at the frequency I am. Now, everything that we cure and raise in our own field, we attune in our ancestral field, and it vibrates out into the field. So again, it creates that pathway. So you can see that it can create a pathway for them. And all these versions do already exist. It's just, are they going to choose it? Are they going to pour their life force into it? Are they going to ignite it? Um, and so I sometimes get to witness my 5D brothers and sisters and my 5D mother, but it's it's not always there. So that's the other interesting thing about the way I at least get to experience the world, is I know what the versions are, and that makes discernment super tricky because I know what's possible. And I it's not on me to force that on them.
Mm-hmm.
And they have free will. They get to choose whatever they want to choose. And it's it's not received well to be a preachy, and I don't want to be that person. It's like I hold them in love, and I'm a safe space. But like, they go through fast food restaurants. We were going for a hike this last weekend. I was hanging out with them, or 2 weekends ago. And I mean, I literally was so nauseous. I almost had to, I wanted to jump out of the car and run away. That's how attuned my body is. Like, even bad organic food, my body is like, no. Like, I can feel the frequency of um, places. I can feel the frequency of people. I can feel the frequency of music. And it's like, I'm not trying to be a snob. I don't want to be, but it literally is just a field. And I never wanted this to be true, because I never wanted to be like a snob. I used to get really frustrated when people be like, well, I can't go to festivals. I love, like, if I could just do EDM. And in the 5D, the anchored 5D experience, and I can go dance at a festival for 3 days straight, and it does not affect my energy field. But it's because it's at the raised, the
Mm-hmm.
anchored 5D festivals. So that's a whole thing, and I'm still honestly figuring that out, because I would love a way that I don't have to be so sensitive. But I think it's when you're in an anchoring role, holding that frequency for a while, is very important. Keeping all the life force clean and pure. There's times when you're anchoring where you have to hold a less dense, and that can even be in your physical body, where I get a download. It's time to fast, and it's literally like, so that you can anchor the highest codes possible. And then there's other times where I'm told to eat a lot, and I'm just famished, and the gauge will just be turned up and down. Even my salt taste buds will be turned up and down based on what is needed, what's required of this path. So I know that is a lot. It sounds so crazy, but I know it to be true.
Yeah, that's interesting. I went through a few years where I was like fasting multiple times a year, and I was like, I never really enjoyed it. Honestly, some people love it. They're like, I feel so amazing. I'm like, I just feel like a slug. Um, but yeah, that's interesting because I haven't fasted in a while. Because
Well,
I
and it
haven't
depends on your
even thought of
role,
it.
because not everyone's an anchorer. Some people are bridgers, and bridgers are holding lower density vibrations open. And you're literally like holding the gate for more people to go into a timeline. It's people that are on the fence. And so you need to hold your density, because basically you can be bridging a bigger gap, I'll say.
Mm.
So the density, actual physical density with food, can actually hold you. So
So
food can,
that's why I'm still allowed to eat ice cream
yes,
because
thank God.
I was with a bunch of spiritual family members and I was like, yeah, I eat ice cream like almost every night, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah,
Well,
it's feels really good.
So yeah, so I didn't really talk about bridging yet, but there are bridgers, and I'm an anchor and a bridger, so it's really complex because sometimes I'm holding the highest codes possible and the going into the lowest density codes possible. So you're really stretching your life force energy. You're creating, oftentimes, um, just a much bigger span in your auric field. Um,
Hmm. And if you're
and
from Bozeman, half of the boys there were named Bridger because of the
oh my
Bridger
gosh,
Mountains.
that's
Yeah.
so funny. So maybe there's a lot of bridgers there. Who knows? But so there's different roles, and there's also just energetic space holders that are they literally have really huge auras, and they have they like are they can quantify energy for other people's missions. But this is like a whole nother conversation. How long did you want this podcast to be?
Yeah, we can go as long as we want.
Because I'm like, there are certain roles. There's like multi-dimensional roles.
Well, this is kind of interesting because you've talked about anchors and bridgers. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe there's like a whole, like a village you've mapped out here or something.
I just want to turn off my notifications. I turned them off for 1 hour. Let's do one more. Let's see. Do not disturb. There we go. Yeah, so there's people who are like masterful space holders. There's also weavers. So I'm also a weaver, and so weavers are creators, and they literally work with string theory, and they it's a lot to like just really put into very clear words, but um they're kind of creators, and they connect people, and they connect threads. They're also very attuned to dimensions. They're very attuned to timelines and moving energy, shifting energy, like working with energy allocation. So sometimes, so we talk about fractalizing life force. We talked about um, uh, well, I guess that's enough. Your life force energy being your resource, like your that is like your commodity. I don't know
Hmm.
commerce. What am I trying to say? Um, and sometimes I will consciously move energy. I can feel it grafting off and send it to other places. So
Hmm.
as I'm an anchor and a bridger, I usually know um, so for example, when I've collapsed timelines and I'm having the deja vu, uh, when I am pulling energy from all the old timelines, anyone that I'm bridging will come into my experience during that period. You'll also get a ton more spam calls and what I call energy vampires. Um, so people that just feel uncomfortable coming into your experience, trying to keep you in those loops. And I don't fully understand if they're really, I haven't fully decided if there's a matrix. I don't love the idea of anything where you have to choose good or bad. Uh, I just believe that it's just polarities of energy, and it's any shadow is the shadow kind of in us, anything that we're
Hmm.
still pulling into harmony. So again, I don't like to say that these energy vampires, I don't believe that it's conscious. I just believe that it's uh, a side of you that's just asking to be pulled into harmony. But it can also try and keep you into what it thinks is safety. So think of these energy vampires as your ego trying to keep you safe. They think that safety means staying, but you know, the only truth to the all of everything is growth, is change. And I personally believe that consciousness is just always expanding. It's ever expanding. It is the infinity sign, which is also the magician in tarot, and ever expanding. And that in cycles we may all come back home, like everything maybe collapses at some times in the history of all time space, and then forms anew. I don't know if we get bored, just
Mhm.
being energy. I don't know. I haven't fully gotten there yet. That's, but these are the things I think about.
Yeah.
um, that really blows my mind. But so anyway, you will witness the same, or at least me, as a bridger, anchor, and weaver. I will witness the same core people coming in and like clockwork, um, when I've leveled up, when I've just mastered a level, completed a level, or leveled up in a
Like characters, not or like actual the same.
actual
Okay.
the same people. And I know I usually know anyway that those are like the people I'm bridging for. They are, I've created an anchor and I'm helping shift energy around, um, to support them. And because really, again, very big concept, we are all one. We are all one consciousness. And if the goal is purification, ascension, growth, and love, truth, um, then we want to expand that in the field. And so, there are people that come into my experience, like that woman, and I know that this is someone I'm bridging and I'm bringing them up. And bringing them up, that's, you might have heard of people talk about this 3D, 5D switch split in the earth. Have you
Hmm.
heard people talk about this?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how we do it. We literally bring people up. We raise our vibe, and then when we've mastered that, when we've come into a state of the 5D frequency, when we've anchored that for ourselves, ideally, we choose to help others. And I don't know if I don't think everyone has to choose this. You can absolutely just choose to heal yourself, and that is what we're here for. That is the whole thing. However, we are in a very, what I believe, conscious time right now where we are aiming to raise the whole consciousness of the earth. The way things are going in the lowest densities isn't sustainable. And it's not sustainable for humanity. And if you look at the dimensions of everything that is as a ladder,
Hmm.
sometimes people say that the earth is like kind of lower on the ladder because of the density or the frequency it's resonating at.
Hmm.
And that it actually, the rest of consciousness can't level up while earth remains vibrating at that frequency. So you look at then our chakra system, and they say without freeing your kundalini energy, without coming into resonance in your root chakra, you can't come into full in all your other chakras, your crown. So I like to take that map and imagine it as the densities of all that is in consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and think of earth as the root chakra. And so when we bring people up and we've done the work ourselves and we've come into harmony, but we reinvest and we decide to consciously share and invest our life force into others and help pull them up. So I personally believe that that's kind of one of my multidimensional missions. And as a weaver, what I witnessed is my energy can graft off and go to other places, to other people, and literally give them like an infusion. And people will contact me. I don't always necessarily know which of the persons I'm pulling up it's going to, but I can feel it happening. And it is a little bit of a detriment to myself, I will definitely be honest about that, but it's something that every time I come up against the question of am I willing to do this work, the answer is always yes.
Hmm.
And maybe someday I'll decide to retire and we'll take all my energy and drive off into the sunset and go dance at all those 5D festivals. But so, for example, I'll get the most amazing messages. Like I'll wake up some mornings and my friend's like, she's like, you were in my room when I woke up this morning. You were standing right next to my bed and you just went, whew, and you gave me this full body infusion of like tingly, warm energy. And I felt like I was walking on the world. And I'm like, well, you're welcome. And she's like, I don't mean to be greedy, but can you do it again? And it's not like that yet. Still mastering that and being conscious of all the things I'm multidimensionally doing. But the first step, right, is noticing what we're noticing, and then you learn, and that's why they call it mastery. But she would then go from being in her, she's been in a very, what I'll call that cocoon state of her awakening. And she'd probably been there for like a year, just really in depth shadow work. And the day after I did this infusion, she went back to school, got a job, um, and adopted a pet from the Humane Society and started fostering. And her daughter Mia is also, she's an indigo child. She's like totally tuned in. Um, and her daughter would start getting into all this trouble at school. So it was almost as if I knew she was going to need extra energy to make the most impact in her area of the world.
Wow.
Um, so that's just one example of like many totally wacky energy transferal experiences that I've done as a weaver. But there's all these roles, and I really could probably go on, but it's kind of a lot. I'm gonna
So
pause
you
and have
knew,
some water.
yeah. So your friend, when she told you, did you already know you had sent the energy to her, and that was she was just like confirming that for you?
No, I knew that I had grafted some energy off because I was feeling, I sometimes I can literally feel it go. And it's like if you think of your body as like a bunch of slices, it's like a one layer of the slice. You're stringing a string cheese. It's like one piece of the string cheese just went like flies off into the astral. Um, and I do go to a lot of people in their dreams, and it's I don't always appear as me. Sometimes I work with owls, and sometimes it's an owl. Sometimes my higher self kind of looks like she kind of looks like a little native slash Asian lady.
Hmm.
And so sometimes it's her. But the people that I work with, or my actual clients when I was working, they kind of got to know the different personalities of me that came in the astral. I do a lot of lucid dreaming. I do a lot of astral projection, and again, some of it's conscious, some of it's not. But the information comes back to me through the field so that I can learn, right? So that I can start to learn what's possible and what the mastery is. And that's one of the coolest ways about how the divine works, is that the information will just come to you. You don't have to go seek it. It comes to you. You're not searching for it. um, it's a literal just allowing and surrendering to this wild ride. And I have so many stories of things that I've seen and witnessed and experienced that most people, I don't know, may never experience, or maybe I'm opening the gate for that. Like I've done telepathy, telekinesis, we talked about spoon bending, um, instant manifestation. But I have not, in this version of me, this conscious version of me, uh, has not yet acknowledged the mastery of that. is how I'll choose to say
Of
it.
sending energy to other people, you mean?
Of sending energy to other people, of having being fully online. I mean, I know that it's possible and I have the belief. But this is one thing that I'm learning to flow with and to master. And I have not yet come into resonance with if it's that I'm still just not mastering it, or if I'm just in that 1% and it hasn't been anchored yet. So I literally can't be there yet because
Mm.
it's not fully formed, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah. You're mentioning the owl. Yesterday we were mountain biking, my kids and I, and we came across this owl like very obviously like flew right in front of us. It was like, "Hey, I'm a big owl." And then I was like, "Whoa!" We were all standing there looking at it, and I was like, "Let me take a picture and share this with my friends." And it wouldn't let me take a picture. It was like the camera just wouldn't work, and the owl was looking at me like, just enjoy it, just like be present, like don't take a
Oh,
picture. And as soon as we left, the camera worked again. Later it was fine. So it
that's
was
why so
just
many people can't get Bigfoot, because he's a shapeshifter and he can actually change the whole dimension. He can just jump dimensions like that. It's just like, I've experienced this, but
you seen
um,
Bigfoot
yeah, but
or you,
I do want to talk about owls for a sec, because so
okay.
owls are one of my signatures, and uh, I have I see owls often, and they're usually an indication of when I'm grafting off energy. It's very common that I will see an owl, or if I'm heal, like I have in the right aligned mission, I can just pull someone's pain completely out of their body. Um, and an owl come, if and show me like that this is a destiny point for that person and I. But a lot of times I will call people, and just right then, as soon as they pick up the phone, an owl will fly in front of them. um
Oh
and
wow.
other examples of this thing, or I'll say something to a friend about seeing an owl, and then they will take a picture and they'll be like, "Oh my god, I was just looking at this in the store," and it's like an owl vase or something. So yeah, it's one of the things when people start working with me and connecting with me, usually they have an owl experience.
Well, we had this was two times in 3 days when there was an owl like physically in front of us being like, "Hey, look at me, I'm a big owl." And so
I
I was
love
like
it. I love it. So
pretty.
owls are not just an owl. They're a obviously they're a representation of wisdom. Everyone knows that, but they are cosmic. They are a representation of a cosmic event. So they work across time and space.
Well, that's kind of interesting because then last night I came across a toad, a city toad, and this only other time I've ever seen a toad like walking down the sidewalk in the city is right before another like very significant initiatory period. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting because I've heard that the Fourth of July is supposed to be quite a big event. That's tomorrow. Um,
Astrological
yeah.
portal. Yeah, it feels very chaotic to me. I'm still not sure what that will feel like. For me, on these holidays, unfortunately, a lot of people make bad choices on holidays, and there tends to be a collective hangover. I really gonna discreate cancel that and hope that enough people can make better choices. Um, but I do think that holidays are wonderful in one way, to get people to be present and to be with their own bodies and to be with people they love and to get outside. But they also can be a colossal distraction and like set people back. Um,
Mm.
so, uh, not to get too sidetracked, but um, where were we going? If we had like three, we were being neurodivergent. We had like three probable conversations that we could have, and I'm having a hard time deciding, because
Well,
there's so much.
I think I was just commenting about the owls,
Yeah.
because um, it's
And
just
we were
so
going to talk
obvious.
about something. after the owls, and then I was like, well, I want to make a quick point about owls.
Well, the other thing that I wanted to ask you about was we've been in one place for many years now, like in a house. And we've been nomadic for, before that, I was nomadic for 8 years. And it still feels really weird to be here. And there's like, we're in the inner city, we're in the like grittiest, most chaotic part of the city. And my wife and I often ask ourselves, like, how long are we supposed to be here? Like, why are we like, it's like we're like stationed here, you know, like when someone's like sent off to
Totally.
someplace and it's like, oh my gosh. Um, because when we think about moving, it's like seems like it's not quite the time yet. And how do you know when? And I think a lot of people have the same question, like, where am I supposed to be now? Um, and you know, we have like our setup here, which is it's handy for doing certain things. But I'd rather wake up seeing snow-capped peaks out my window. So yeah, just yeah. What are your thoughts on like how you know when it's time to move on from like a physical place
Yeah.
or a social circumstance or whatever it might be?
Absolutely. Well, again, we talk about frequency and resonance, and then we also were able to talk about when sometimes people will say a thing, and I can just feel I know that I'm supposed to be there. I can feel that it's aligned. To me, it feels like this electric silver, like they're spinning silver, you know, and a lot of times when a change is meant to be made, and we talk about, I talked a little about the in between, kind of where you know where you're at is wrapping up, or you can start to feel that things aren't in resonance, like things just don't feel good anymore. And it might just be a little at first, and then it kind of just keeps cranking up, and it keeps kind of nagging at you, and just that feeling in your stomach, or things that you used to enjoy there just feel old hat. um it can be really a strange time because um it's like a lot of people's first idea about that is to gaslight themselves and be like, what is wrong with me? Maybe I'm depressed. When all reality is, it's like you are a little depressed, but it's just because you've outgrown what where you are, you know, or your mission is done. You could put it in whatever terms you want, but like source shows me, and I can feel when it's time. And it's a little tricky because it's not always like it's time to go. Sometimes it's just I can tell it's time to start tying up loose ends. Like sometimes source will say start packing. And literally I'll hear start packing. I have no idea where I'm going, but I know that it's time to start kind of tying up loose ends and just getting mentally prepared to shift. And it's really interesting because when you're about to shift, and it can be, usually it's before a dimensional shift or upgrade or level up, um, or it's might be before you are going to collapse a timeline. You start to have these feelings, and it can feel like apathy, it can feel like depression, it can feel like, what am I even doing here? You start to ask yourself, what am I even doing? And the ego will usually kick in and want to keep you safe. It'll start to panic a little. Sometimes we call it DEFCON 1, where your systems all ramp up. You might even get a faster heart rate. And
Mm-hmm.
like it starts to feel really uncomfortable. And again, the ego wants to start gaslighting you and being like, what are you talking about? No, you're going to stay here. Look, this is convenient. This is our house. This is where we live. We've created friends. We're rooted in. Um, but the frequency doesn't lie. And the frequency says, it's not a match anymore. It's time to move on. And so the real magic is notice what you're noticing without gaslighting it, because half the time when people think they are sick, the energetics is just speaking to them, even their body. Like and we didn't even talk about sickness, but uh, their literal frequency is just off. And if your vibration, the vibration of each of your organs, because they all have their own vibrational state, is off, the longer it's off, sickness, the more decrepit it gets, the more decrepit that timeline gets. You're not supposed to be there anymore. And so it honestly, it just gets, it almost gets like worse and worse until either you give up and stay, or, and even then, it's just going to come back in loops, or you make the choice to just go. And so oftentimes, this is why so many people are getting sick in our society, is they aren't operating at the frequency that they're meant to be. And they've chosen to stay and gaslight themselves instead of acknowledging their growth. And
Mm.
a lot of times it's totally understandable, because the way our society has been built, it's hard to see paths out, especially like if you've invested so much time and life force energy into this thing. um, it can be terrifying to go. So it's really like a combination of staying in your truth, not gaslighting your feelings, because literally they are telling you things, very important things, um, and becoming less fearful of making those leaps, trusting your infinite nature, trusting that the universe has you and only wants the best for you. And everything you experience is for you in some way, shape, or form. Words chosen very intentionally. And so for me, because I'm so attuned, I'll know when my chapter's up. There might be that in between where you're called to rest, you're called to pack, you're called to purge, and that could be a physical purge, like in your body, like to detox, because you're going to go up a density, or um, move into make a timeline move. But usually it's you're literally changing your frequency. Um, or you could be called to physically purge, like stuff in your house.
Mm-hmm.
The whole concept around like spring cleaning is, it's there's a whole astrology, there's a whole energetics I'm not going to get into, but and the Chinese very much believe in this too. Almost all cultures believe in this kind of purge. um and that's a whole nother conversation I won't talk about, but we could, is just density, just like how the matrix, if you want to call it, or how our society, the powers that be, have wanted to convince us to have as much stuff as possible, because it makes it harder for us to climb out of the generated, uh, contained
Mm.
humanity
Never considered
frequency.
that. Like consumerism as a tool for keeping people
Stuck.
where they are.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what you want to do when you feel that, right? And again, some people are on mission. So I'll start to get hints about where I'm supposed to go. I'll start to kind of see that timeline coming in. And there will be hints if you're really paying attention, like listening to conversations around you, watching license plates, um, even the type of cars that are coming into your experience, especially if you're going leveling up. You'll start to see hints, like if you're watching a movie, uh, take note, where is that movie located? What are they talking about? Are they moving from one place to another? You will literally start seeing hints. And I mean, it's so funny because the universe weaves, and it's not the universe, it's us. We literally leave ourselves breadcrumb trails. Our higher selves, because we're all existing now, all at the same time, send us hints and clues, and that's what synchronicities are. I'm going to pause. I get so excited.
Yeah, you get so excited. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, regarding moving, it's just like we're just like in a holding pattern, kind of seeing what's gonna happen. Well, we could wrap there. I wanted to. I was just looking back because I made a lot of notes while you're talking. There's a lot of great frames of thinking that I haven't heard people talk about in this way. So that's super cool.
That you
Let
actually
me just,
physically struggle.
yeah,
I love it. It's so
I don't
great.
know. I just wanted, there was one thing that we were talking about, actually, maybe even before the episode, um, as like an interesting coincidence, because you were talking about going to get some spring water
Mm,
from a spring, hiking to spring water in Shasta. And I have been, I've been making these elixirs, these um, crystal elixirs where I'm imbuing the water with certain frequencies that I'm asking it to be programmed with. And I've been using distilled water. And my question was, could I make even more powerful elixirs with fresh spring water? And
absolutely.
there's this work from Veda Austin where she does crystallography. She freezes the water and it will show her the images of the consciousness of the memory that the water
Yep.
has. And there's a particular spring in New Zealand called New Zealand source water. And it's like just, it gives these amazingly pure images of just the whole thing would freeze into like one giant snowflake, essentially.
Yep.
Beautiful patterns. And people get healed by drinking the spring water. And so I was like, I
Yep.
wonder if we have that here where I am. And I found this woman who sources local spring water. She's like a water engineer, and then she realized she didn't want to just be doing municipal water. She wanted to be like sourcing spring water for people. So I'm going to be going to get some of that spring water to see whatever I can discover about the local spring water. But yeah, anything you want to comment about?
There's so much I want to say about it. Are you surprised? So water is a big key to our physical health and our frequency. So there's a ton of minerals in natural alive water. Most of what people are having now is dead water. So in theory, it will keep you alive, but it will not, you won't be, it's hard to thrive without healthy water and alive water. So, again, another thing, which again, I talked a little about nutrition, but the food and water that we're nourishing our physical vessel with is extremely important. And if you want to have access to more magic, more clairs, a clearer channel, purify your body. Be really conscious about what you're putting into your physical body and put stuff in it that's alive, and you will have more aliveness. It's not rocket science. However, it is a little more complex to do in our reality in certain places because um, to find living water, even if you buy natural spring water at the store, which I do recommend because distilled isn't alive and purified isn't alive. And even if you get like a really high end Kagan water filtration system, anything that sends electricity through the water is basically killing it. It's it's not worth the money. But you shouldn't be drinking tap water because there's also tons of heavy metals and there's tons of stuff in there that's basically killing your pineal gland. I don't want to get into conspiracies. But I know when I made the switch, just dramatic difference. And I've helped other people with this as well. I want to talk about Find a Spring. So there's a website called Find a Spring. I think it's findaspring.org. Amazing. There's also, if you just Google search, oftentimes you can find threads on Reddit or, any of those where people will talk about springs. There's even full groups that talk about this on Facebook. So finding a natural spring is huge. Again, you just want to be careful in the summer if you live somewhere where there's lots of farming. You just want to make sure that it is a clean spring and even if you have a pendulum, using a pendulum or body testing to make sure, because even some of these natural springs at certain times of the year when there's less natural run or less rainfall and more farming, they can become corrupt or have bacteria or chemicals in them. So you do want to be careful with that. So it's all about water that's alive. Now, also, we think about food. Most of the soil that's being farmed now is no longer its natural. Oh, sorry, one more thing on water. Electrolytes. So most people need salt. They need healthy, the original, the OG salt. So Celtic sea salt, Himalayan sea salt, the good stuff. Putting some of that in your water can also help. Even if you have bad water, putting lemon and salt in it can help. You can also use certain kinds of crystals, but like there's special shungite that's for your
Mm-hmm.
water, and that can also enhance grounding and protection as well for your energy field. And then you can also do structured water. So you can actually buy a container at home that structures your water. And
Spins
then,
it, vortexes it.
yep, and you can get wands as well. Now, keep in mind though, you really, ideally, it's best to start with a live water rather than, getting all these fancy tools and gadgets. But so water's super important. And a lot of people are under they have less vitamin D than they're supposed to have. They have less electrolytes, less salt in their body. And there's this war on salt, but salt, especially for the natural state of the human, is pretty empathic. Like as we expand our heart space, you start to feel more. And, people talk about protection, and that is the thing in root. But once you're connected to the unified field, uh, it's pretty much just open. You're allowing the full energy flow, and that's how you expand your aura. And that's a whole nother podcast. But salt is super important. So empaths need extra salt, and they should be having salt and lemon all day, every day, because salt's a purifier. And so even, before my sessions, if I am going to work on a client, I like to just give them a little pinch of salt on their tongue. And so this is a good thing to, and we didn't really talk about programming, but so much of what we've been told is the opposite. Like I sun gaze every day, and it doesn't matter the time of day. Now I slowly worked up to it, but I can go look at full day sun. I can look at an eclipse without damage to my eyes. In fact, I get a boost. I get
Hmm.
extra boost in my gifts afterwards. So the Egyptians did this. This was known to most, past higher consciousness civilizations. Um, and then the soil. So most of our soil is also lacking in the original minerals that it had. So we were supposed to be able to get so much more minerals from our food, and even organic food is just way less nutrient dense than it used to be. So, you know, even like if people choose to go on like a full vegan diet, um, you sometimes need to like double what your intake might be to get the same, maybe even more, maybe even like quadruple to get the same nutrients. Um, so it's a thing, but there are companies that are regenerating soil, making these like soil teas. There are, people working on like actually watering full agriculture products with structured water. And in these cases, like there's this company in California called Upterra. In their labs, they can actually see what the plants do on the inside. And when the plants take normal water, they just have one straight line. Hold on, there's an alarm going off. Here we go. Stop. Uh, when the plants receive structured water, they match the shape. They like
Hmm.
actually meet the water and harmonize. So it's like way easy. It's almost like they're singing the same song, and it's the same for our body. The more stuff you put in that you're innate body recognizes, the easier it will be to digest. This is another reason why so many people have digestive issues.
Mm. Yeah. Well, that's cool about the plants and the structured water. Yeah, I'm curious to see when I get a hold of some of this local water. But I would like to be able to go fill up my own rather than having it to come through a company. But because it's kind of fun to go out there and fill up your own. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the my old research days when I was in Yellowstone, and we were looking for microscopic life in the hot springs and characterizing different life forms.
Interesting.
But we had to like for our laboratory experiments, we had to just go and get the spring water from that specific spring because they all have their own specific pH,
And
temperature, mineral content, and there could be two springs side by side that are totally different, right? Because the water's flowing in through different rock formations or whatever it may be. And so you go and you carry 60 pounds of water back from the wilderness just so you can run a reactor in a laboratory to grow these highly specialized little microbes. Yeah, it's
I bet you
carrying
found
heavy
some
things out
really
of
interesting
awkward
stuff in
places.
there.
What's that?
I bet you found some really interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, these the geometries that are expressed on the nano level are pretty fascinating. Just the way that they these particles will assemble themselves in different 3D geometric structures is pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, and you think about what you talked about, this geometric structures, and you can talk to water, and they make the famous what's his name, Hansui Moto or something. He spoke
Hmm.
to, and then froze the water and made snowflakes, and they were completely different based on what he said or what kind of music he played. And of course, they've done these experiments with plants. Think about for people. Think about like the words we're telling ourselves, the music we're listening to, and and then you can do this with your water in the morning. So I always whisper little things into my water, like and then hold it with real intention. And of course, there's a lot of the philosophers, the spiritualists, gurus of our last couple decades that talk about really being mindful as you eat, because the intention and the mindset with which you consume uh, is very important. And one thing I alluded to but didn't get to yet, because there's steps, right? So in theory, it's all just dots of pliable energy. Uh, but getting from here to there with your belief system and training your cells and train your human body to believe that is a process. So if you can eat ice cream without any judgment, without any subconscious judgment, you could actually, there is a world, there is a timeline and frequency with space and time where we can eat anything we want and not gain any weight and not have any ill effects. I really do believe that, but you have to go through the same process of having the belief, holding it long enough, flushing it through your body, literally integrating it. And then you need at least 1% of the humans alive to also believe that before it's fully anchored. That's not to tire anyone out. We need people to believe these things, that's how we create totally new realities. Um, so anyway,
Hmm.
we could talk about dimensions and realities in the next time.
Yeah, let's. I'm sure there's a lot more to go over. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with today?
Yes. Despite the complexity of everything we've just talked about, the most important thing, like the key to life, is figuring out who you really are, but allowing during that process, acknowledging and allowing that might change and you might have to do it a few times, because that's the only constant in the universe is growth and change. The other thing is presence. presence is key. If you feel like you're suffering, if you feel overwhelmed, come right back into this moment and remember you're breathing, you're alive. If you are breathing and you are alive, then technically everything is okay in this moment. And just move from there, just one breath at a time. Um, what else? And I really do believe the full mastery in this life is how much of your heart can you open while still being in this physical body. Because a lot of people, they think they hear about discernment and they hear about letting go, and they think that that means cutting yourself off from pieces of your heart. No, you actually love yourself. You come into so much self love that it becomes the biggest act of love is you choosing truth for everyone involved. And you can still hold people in love from afar. And sometimes the catalyst for their growth is you stepping away. Um, and you can also choose to do kind of what I do and send energy through the field and other various things as you become accomplished. But but the heart is the should be the leader in this physical vessel, and the rest should yield to that.
Mm-hmm. Aho. Well, Liz, thanks so much for all of your stories. It's been fun.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to get to talk about all my musings.
All right, we'll see you next time.
All right, have a great vacation.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Bye.